Okay. Oh, no, where's my coffee? Coffee could be number one. How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I thought it was time to sort of talk about how I survive winter in my van. So if you don't know, I live in Canada. I'm in Alberta, which is a prairie province, which means primarily flat grasslands, although the western half is amazing as the foothills go up into the Rocky Mountains, but I digress. It gets darn cold here. We've been spoiled this year, but that doesn't negate the fact that there are very cold moments, stretches of time, 3, 4, 5 days, sometimes an entire week. We are at the tail end of what has been a very cold week here in Calgary, and it's going to be nice for the next couple of days. And by nice, I mean like still going to be below zero, like below freezing. But then in about a week's time, those temperatures are going to drop again. So I've been meaning to kind of do this list for a while, talk about the things that I knew going in, what I would need, like going into van life, and what I've learned is hugely beneficial now that I've been in the van and I'm currently living through my second winter. So none of these items are in any sort of particular order, not really. They're all equally important, I think. Well, maybe not equally important. There are definitely some things I would say are vastly more important than others. It's pretty self-explanatory though. So we're going to start it off right away with number one. I can't really show you, but it's insulation. When I got my van, I built the entire thing from the ground up. I gutted it right down to the bare metal. It was just a bare bones cargo van back here. And the first thing I started with was underguard, rocker guard painting, undercoating, rocker guard spray paint. I truly believe that that's a good first step for insulation. It also helps prevent any sort of rust if water gets behind your walls and whatnot. It just protects the paint that way. It doesn't protect the paint, it protects the metal. Sorry, it is still early, hang on. And then after that, I went with insulation board, and there's a whole bunch of stuff out there, but I went with stuff similar to this. This is just a piece I happen to have on hand. I use it for my windows on my side doors, and I have it out. I think this is about 1 inch. I think I went with 2 inches on my wall, and what I used to adhere it to the walls of my van was spray foam. So when you get down to brass tacks, I kind of have like 3 layers of insulation between the rocker guard spray, the spray foam, and then the foam boards. I guess you could say 4 because then I put wall paneling up, which is this gray stuff right up here. And I have had very comfortable winters because of that insulation. Yes, it kind of has the opposite effect in the summer months when we go the polar opposite of temperatures and it gets very sweaty. It is harder to cool the van off a bit, but that is why I have 2 ceiling fans, and that is not really what we're talking about right now. We're talking about containing the heat and keeping yourself comfortable in the winter, and insulation, I think, is detrimental to surviving winter. Obviously, if you're going to be primarily in a different location where maybe it doesn't get quite as cold, you could knock it back a bit. You might not have to go as thick. You might not have to use the spray foam. You could get away with using spray adhesive, let's say. Hi, Stella. You want to come say hi? But that's sort of up to your discretion. Do some research, see what works. Like I said, I'm in a very cold place, and I would have no qualms going somewhere even colder with my build the way it is. But yeah, if you're in a place like the magical island of Vancouver, you might not need as much insulation. But I still think it's a very important thing to not be overlooked. Right? Another bonus thing would be like animals. They could be keeping you warm. Let's move on to the next one. Actually, I was going to change the camera angle, but since I'm here and I'm comfortable and it's an item that I can't really show you because of where mine is, we're just going to talk about it. After insulation, I think another important one, obviously, you've probably all heard about it. You probably are already aware of what they are. A diesel heater. From all the research that I did and all the heating ways you can go about heating your tiny home on wheels, the Chinese diesel heaters are obviously the best go-to. Now, that's not to say that the Chinese diesel heaters on Amazon are the best. You've got the higher end ones like Webasto and Espar, the European models. They're higher end, they're more expensive, they probably last longer, but they're very expensive. But whatever path you choose to go with, a diesel heater is a no-brainer if you're going to be in climates like I am. I think they got their start as like truck heaters or parking heaters or whatever for in the backs of semis for truck drivers and whatnot. And they're just little units about this big. They're about the size of a loaf of bread. and they run off diesel. You can also get gas versions in those higher end models as well. I like the diesel system because it's separate from my gas. I don't have to worry about it sipping away at my gas tank as well. And they are dry air, right? So they've got an intake, they bring in cool air, and they exhaust as well, and they blow nice dry air into the van. And living in a tiny space, that is just 100% necessary because it's so easy for moisture to get trapped in these tiny spaces. Any other options, such as propane or butane or anything like that, they're gonna be putting moisture into the air. Those are best left as backups. So a diesel heater is definitely the way to go. And don't think that you can't just get away with using the Chinese diesel heaters. They are popular for a reason. They're popular because they're affordable. Most people, I think, that are looking to get into van life, especially these days, are people that are looking to save money, don't have a choice, or whatever might be happening in your life, right? Yes, you're always going to have the people that are curious, that are well off enough, that want to get in and live and travel on the road, and that is fine as well. But for the majority of us, we need something affordable. And the Chinese diesel heaters coming in under $200 in Canada, probably even cheaper in the United States, are the way to go. You could have 3, 4, 5 Chinese diesel heaters over the course of a certain amount of time before you would even come close to touching the cost of those high-end S-Bars and Webasto's. My friend sent me this article somewhere. It was on a message board or something about this couple. They were living in their van, and the diesel heater, I don't know, it shut down or it malfunctioned, and they were afraid they almost died, is what they said. Their van could have burned to the ground. I think it's probably user error, the way the thing was installed. Again, I can only speak to my experience, and I've never had any problems. Yes, I've learned the hard way. I shouldn't say I haven't had any problems. But again, if you're installing it yourself, the onus is kind of on you for how the machine is going to behave. Do your research, or just get somebody a little bit more professional to install it for you. The thing that sort of irked me about that article is those two were on there, or whoever was writing it, and they were complaining that, oh, we're never going to go with a Chinese diesel heater again. That's garbage. I can't believe we didn't even get 3 years out of it. We almost got 3 years or whatever. And I'm just thinking the entire time, I'm like, you almost got 3 years out of a Chinese diesel heater? That's pretty freaking amazing. Like, you need to have an understanding of what you're getting yourself into. I'm on my second diesel heater right now as it is. The only reason that is the case is because my other one, I think the bearing in my fan was going and it was annoying. It didn't actually break. It was still functioning. But now I've got that one out as a backup, which is another good thing. Since they're so affordable, get a second one and have it as a backup in case of emergencies. Again, that's sort of the low cost of it allows you to have that safety net. But hey, if you've got the money, just go with the high-end one. I hear they never break. So now, keeping on that track of the heater and how I believe that the diesel heater should be your number one go-to for your main primary way of heating your home. If you can't afford to get a backup, or even if you can afford to get a backup, you may find yourself in a situation, maybe it's the dead of night, it's freezing cold outside, and your diesel heater shuts down on you and stops working. Well, the last thing you're probably going to want to do if the situation is that sort of detrimental is get out your toolbox and start working on your diesel heater. I know I wouldn't want to be doing that in that situation because I was a little bit of a bonehead, and the way I installed my diesel heater, everything that's underneath my bed has to come out and the bed has to get folded in before I can even get access to my unit. Getting off track here, this is all to say that the next item on the list is a backup heat source. There's many options. As I started the video with, I've got a Mr. Buddy. Yes, it's propane, but it's a backup. And these are completely 100% safe to use, in my opinion. In my experience, I haven't had any issues. They have a shut off if they detect too much, I think, CO2 in the air or whatever. I used this on my very first camping trip back before I even had any amenities in Lucky, and it shut itself off. I thought I had run out of propane, and I discovered once I woke up, and I was a little cold, it had shut itself off, like it wasn't running, and that's when I realized, hey, I could just start it right back up. It had shut itself off because it's got a sensor that can sense when there's too much CO2. Why was there too much CO2 in the air in that situation? I had no ceiling fans then. So my advice would be, in a situation where you got to use something like a propane heater, such as a Mr. Buddy, open a window, open a ceiling fan. Just have some fresh air coming in, and there's not going to be any problems at all. That being said, you can also go with, what are those, Olympian Wave 3, I'm not too familiar with them. Obviously, I've seen other van lifers use them. Apparently, they're a little bit safer, but they still run off propane. That's another option as well, although they tend to be on a little bit on the larger side. And then again, keeping with that, I have a second backup, which is an electric heater. Little tiny space heater. This guy puts out a great amount of heat. Obviously, this is a little bit more selective because this will only work when I have shore power, when I am plugged in and running off 120 volts, wherever that might be, a campground, a family member's house, whatever. Or if you have like a big enough generator, I guess you could use that as well. But yeah, this is definitely a great little guy to have. Obviously, I wouldn't say he's so much as a backup as an alternative to save yourself some diesel or gas, depending on, you know, how you're heating your home. I think this is a very valuable thing to have on hand, especially if you're going to be around places that do provide a lot of power. But as a person who's looking to get off grid, maybe that's not as much of an option for you. And one more thing, as a complete other alternative, if maybe you can't afford to get yourself a Mr. Buddy or anything, and you're not going to be around power and you don't have a space heater or don't need a space heater because you're not going to be around power, this is going great. You're probably going to have some sort of stove. This again is going to be able to double as a heat source. This guy runs off my little green propane bottles. So in my case, this is great. I mean, the Mr. Buddy runs off of propane. This runs off of propane. You don't have to use the little green bottles. You could get the adapters and the hoses to connect to a bigger cylinder, like a 20-pound propane cylinder if you wanted to. I actually considered doing that at one point. Didn't go that route, obviously. But again, in a pinch, especially these higher end stoves, like I sold my Xbox so I could get this jet boil stove. It's not cheap, but I like cooking and I like the ability to be able to simmer things. But obviously, if you were just trying to survive, cranking this bad boy up to high, that's going to put a nice amount of heat into your home. Again, with something like this, just make sure you've got your ceiling fan open or a window cracked or whatever. And obviously, if you can't afford a jet boil, there's nothing wrong with that. Go get yourself a Coleman or whatever, especially if you're only considering using it as a heat source. Another thing that would work is even a smaller unit. Oh, mine's packed away, but the little jet boil Java, it's a mini stove. That thing puts off an insane amount of heat. It runs off isobutane. Let me see if I can grab it here. So this little stove attaches to the top of the isobutane canister. And this, I think this can is almost out, but come on, do it, Doug. And he said, let there be fire. But yeah, like that's, again, in a pinch. Or if you're in a smaller vehicle, like a minivan or a car, an SUV, this might be a good option as well. I wouldn't recommend something like this if you've got animals just roaming around. Again, it should just be considered as a backup. I'm a firm believer that these should just be your sources for cooking, but you never know what's going to happen. Another thing I will mention quickly here, and unfortunately, I don't think I have mine on me, which is a real bit of a pain in the butt. I think what happened is I got packed into a box that I've dropped off at my storage unit. First world problems, but it's a water bottle. That has come in very handy, especially when you're feeling under the weather, but to utilize it with something like the jet boil stove, boil yourself up some water, pour it into that water bottle and get cozy with that thing underneath your blankets. That is, well, can be an absolute lifesaver. It might be a bit of an exaggeration, but still, it is super comfortable, super cozy. And that was something that I didn't even consider when I moved into my van, because I never had a lot of experiences using water bottles growing up, right? And it was my sister-in-law, hi Steph, and my brother, I think, but she made me, I think crocheted me a nice little sleeve for the water bottle to go in. And it wasn't until I got that gift from them that I even considered it. And then after using it, yes, great. You could just fill that sucker up with some nice hot water, put it at the foot of the bed, keep your tootsies warm on those cold winter nights. That's just one of those things, right? I never thought about it, and I think it is absolutely pertinent to having your tiny home on wheels. All right, and another thing that I didn't even consider when I was moving into my van, like a big dum-dum, was the clothes that I would have at my disposal to wear. Obviously, I'm going to wear them. What else would you do with clothes? Oh boy. But fleece-lined clothes, right? These fleece-lined pants, these things have been my go-to ever since they got sent to me on those cold days, because usually I'm rocking jeans or, well, shorts or cargo pants, something like that. Stylish, that's up for interpretation. Warm, no. Now, you could go this route with stuff like that, and you could put on a pair of long johns, and that was the first thing that I did. That's where my brain went first, and I was like, cold wearing clothes, long johns, a base layer, or however you want to call it, right? So I've had these since pretty much day one when I moved into my van, pretty darn close, and they're fine, but they're, what are they? 90% polyester, 10% spandex. So if you want to be like a superhero underneath your clothes, that's fine. They are going to provide a little bit of warmth. And actually stuff like this, you can just get this stuff at like Walmart. They do come in levels of warmth, starting at like warm, warmer, warmest, you dead. That is a great option to start with, very affordable. But these pants with the built-in, I keep wanting to say thermal layer, but it's not, they're fleece lined. They got the nice, you see that fuzzy on the inside? On those super cold days, these are invaluable. Valuable? Invaluable? They're really good to have. 2 pairs would probably be the best because you don't want to find yourself in a situation where these are dirty, they got to be washed, and you don't have another pair to wear, and it's very, very cold outside. Ill-advised way to live life. That's exactly how I'm living right now, unfortunately, but that's okay. And then for sleeping in the van, again, when it's really, really cold and maybe I don't want to be ripping through my diesel, just keep it at a certain level where the van will stay just beneath comfortably warm, but I'm saving money, then we can go with wool. Like, this is another set that was sent to me by a subscriber, and it was a game changer, and I never thought about stuff like this. The reason why I probably didn't think about stuff like this is I never did any sort of like winter camping or spend any sort of time out in the cold when I was living in sticks and bricks. When it was cold, I had my butt inside staying warm in the heated home, right? This is the one aspect I didn't do a lot of research on when I decided that I was going to start living in a vehicle. And this is merino wool. It says merino 250. I know nothing else about it, what that 250 would indicate or anything, but there's pants and there's a long sleeved top layer. And these are so comfortable and they will keep you so warm if you don't want to be ripping through all of whatever your fuel source might be. I only use them as pajamas, but I imagine you could use them as a base layer if you were out, you know, hiking in the cold weather. You will never find me doing that, though. And last but not least, item for keeping warm in the van during winter is going to be subjective for sure, and it's going to be an automatic go-to for people because we all like to be cozy when we're sleeping, right? So blankets, however many you might need to stay warm. But for me, my personal favorite is a weighted blanket. Oh, I had never used one until I moved into my van. Not only is it warm, but that like comfort you get from feeling it pressing down on you while you're just trying to drift off to dreamland. I highly recommend them. I know some people can't use them. They don't like the way they feel. Just get yourself a nice warm blanket then that's gonna keep the cold off of your precious, precious body. That's weird. Very weird way to phrase that. But I think these are awesome, especially for someone like me that has difficulty falling asleep in his older years. I'm not a teenager anymore. The days of staying up all night and sleeping all day are definitely behind me. So any help I can get to fall asleep when it is time to do so is very welcome. Let's put this away before it gets dirty. That's better. Trade in your blanket for your cat, or your cat's rear end. Come here. There. So that's a little bit better. As previously mentioned, fur babies are also real good sources of heat. And maybe not heat in the traditional sense, but comfort, and that goes a long way. So that's it, everybody. I know there's going to be a lot of room for suggestions and whatnot. If you've got things that you think other people might find handy, leave those suggestions in the comments below. I have no qualms doing winter in my van. I'm very well prepared. If I had to choose 2 of the most important things, I'm going to go with insulation and my diesel heater. Those 2 things combined are definitely what's going to make your tiny home feel like a bigger home in terms of comfort that you have when you're in those sticks and bricks. So, you trying to get on the roof? Absolutely not. Good gravy. I'm gonna leave this one here, you guys. Until the next one, go out there, be happy, be creative, be yourselves. Most importantly, be positive, and we will see you all in the next one. Hey, good girl. Oh, she's gonna do it. Hey, Stella. All right, we'll see you in the next one. You're probably too large to get up there.